For nearly 6,000 years, human civilization moved at the speed of a horse. Kings traveled by horse, empires expanded by horse, wars were won and lost by horse. Entire economies depended upon muscle, wheels, and patience. For generation after generation, transportation barely changed. A farmer in 18th century America traveled at nearly the same speed as a farmer in ancient Rome. Distance ruled human life. And then, everything changed. A violent mechanical explosion shatters the silence. The sound of an engine starting. The screen erupts into motion. Rapid-fire montage, horse-drawn wagons, steam engines, crowded city streets. Factory workers, the first automobiles, assembly lines, highways under construction, Route 66, 1950s suburbia, traffic jams, muscle cars, moon rockets, electric vehicles, self-driving prototypes. In little more than a century, one invention transformed how people lived, worked, traveled, fought wars, built cities, and imagined freedom itself. It reshaped the American landscape, created fortunes, destroyed industries, fueled economic booms, triggered environmental crises, and altered the course of world history. This is not merely the story of a machine. This is the story of the machine that rebuilt America. To understand how automobiles transformed America, we first need to understand the world that existed before them. By the late 19th century, the United States was growing at an astonishing pace. Factories were multiplying. Railroads stretched across the continent. Cities were expanding. Millions of immigrants were arriving. Yet for most Americans, daily transportation remained surprisingly primitive. A farmer heading into town still relied on horses. A merchant delivering goods still relied on horses. Families traveling between communities still relied on horses. The nation was industrializing. Transportation was not. Visuals of muddy streets, dead horses being removed, workers shoveling manure. In cities, the horse created problems few people think about today. New York City alone housed hundreds of thousands of horses. Every day those animals produced mountains of waste. Manure filled streets. Flies spread disease. The smell was overwhelming. Urban planners feared that growing cities would eventually drown beneath horse waste. The horse-powered economy was reaching its limits. America needed something new. The question was what? Across Europe and America, inventors were pursuing a dream that sounded absurd. A carriage that moved without horses. The idea was revolutionary, and many believed it would never work. The first attempts were clumsy. Steam-powered vehicles rattled down roads. Some exploded. Others broke down constantly. Most frightened anyone who saw them. Newspapers often treated these machines as curiosities rather than serious inventions. Yet inventors refused to quit, because they understood something profound. Whoever solved personal transportation would reshape civilization itself. History often makes technological progress appear inevitable. In reality, the future is usually a battlefield. At the dawn of the automobile age, three rival technologies competed for dominance: steam, electricity, and gasoline. Each had advantages. Each had weaknesses. And for a time, nobody knew which would win. Steam power was familiar. Railroads had already proven its effectiveness. But steam vehicles were heavy and slow to start. Electric cars were elegant, quiet, smooth. easy to operate. Many wealthy Americans preferred them. Gasoline vehicles were noisy, dirty, dangerous, and unreliable. Yet hidden inside those flaws was an advantage that would change everything: potential. Gasoline engines could become lighter, more powerful, and capable of traveling far greater distances. As engineers improved them, the balance began to shift. The race for the future had begun. In towns across America, the first automobiles attracted enormous attention. People stopped what they were doing. Some laughed, others cheered. Many were terrified. Newspapers described frightened horses bolting from roads. Farmers complained about noise. Some communities attempted to ban automobiles entirely. To many Americans, these machines looked less like transportation and more like dangerous toys for the rich. No one yet understood what they were witnessing. Not merely a new machine, but the beginning of a new era. A machine that would transform every corner of American life. A machine that would rebuild the nation from the ground up. The automobile already existed, but one man was about to make it available to everyone. And in doing so, he would unleash one of the most powerful economic revolutions in history. By the beginning of the 20th century, the automobile was no longer a fantasy. It was real, but it was still a luxury. Most Americans could admire automobiles. Very few could afford them. Cars were expensive, complicated, and often unreliable. Owning one was a privilege reserved for the wealthy. The automobile existed, but it had not yet changed America. That was about to happen. Henry Ford was born on a farm in Michigan in 1863. But unlike many farm boys, Ford was fascinated not by agriculture, but by machines. He took apart watches, studied engines, obsessed over mechanical systems. To him, machinery represented freedom. Machines did not tire, they did not complain, and they could accomplish what human muscle never could. As America entered the industrial age, Ford became convinced of something that few others believed. The automobile should not belong only to the wealthy. It should belong to everyone. Friends considered the idea ridiculous. Experts dismissed it. Investors doubted it. But Ford refused to let go of the dream. History remembers Henry Ford as a genius. What it often forgets is how many times he failed. His first company collapsed. Then another. Investors lost patience. Competitors appeared stronger. For years, Ford seemed destined to become just another forgotten inventor. Yet every failure taught him something. He realized that building a successful automobile was only half the challenge. The greater challenge was building it cheaply. That insight would change history. On October 1, 1908, Ford introduced a machine that would alter the course of America. The Model T. It was not luxurious. It was not beautiful. It was not technologically revolutionary. What made it extraordinary was something far more important. It was practical. The Model T was durable enough for rough country roads, simple enough to repair, reliable enough to trust, affordable enough for ordinary people. And suddenly, millions of Americans saw a future they had never imagined. A future where mobility belonged to everyone. Farmers bought them. Teachers bought them. Shopkeepers bought them. Families bought them. The automobile was no longer a toy, it was becoming a necessity. Yet even the Model T faced a problem. Demand was exploding. Factories could not build cars fast enough. Ford needed a breakthrough. He found inspiration in an unexpected place: slaughterhouses. There, animal carcasses moved from worker to worker in a continuous process. Ford wondered, what if automobiles moved the same way? The answer became one of the most influential innovations in industrial history: the moving assembly line. Before the assembly line, workers moved around the product. Now the product moved to the workers. The effect was astonishing. A car that once required over 12 hours to build could now be assembled in roughly 90 minutes. Production skyrocketed. Costs collapsed. The impossible became ordinary. And the modern manufacturing age was born. In 1914, Ford shocked the business world again. He announced that workers would earn $5 per day, nearly double the prevailing wage. Critics called him insane. Competitors were outraged. Investors feared disaster. Instead, something remarkable happened. Workers flocked to Ford factories. Productivity soared, and Ford employees became customers. The very people building automobiles could now afford to buy them. Mass production met mass consumption. The modern American economy was taking shape. The numbers were staggering. In 1900, automobiles were rare. By the 1920s, they were everywhere. The transformation happened with breathtaking speed. Entire industries emerged almost overnight: gas stations, auto repair shops, roadside diners, motels, insurance companies, driving schools, traffic police. America was reorganizing itself around a machine. The automobile wasn't merely becoming part of life. It was becoming the center of it. Cars created a problem. A nation full of automobiles still needed roads. At the beginning of the 20th century, many American roads were terrible. Some were little more than dirt tracks. Rain turned them into mud. Winter made them nearly impassable. The automobile demanded something unprecedented: a complete reconstruction of America's transportation infrastructure. And that is exactly what happened. The country launched one of the largest construction efforts in human history. Millions of miles of roads spread across the continent. Rivers were bridged. Mountains were pierced. Deserts were crossed. Distance itself was under attack. For most of human history, geography controlled opportunity. People lived near where they worked near where they shopped, and shopped near where they lived. The automobile shattered that relationship. Suddenly, a worker could travel miles to a job. Families could visit distant relatives. Businesses could serve larger markets. Entire regions became interconnected. What once required days could now be accomplished in hours. The world was not physically smaller, but it felt smaller. And perception often changes history as much as reality. Perhaps no idea became more deeply woven into American identity than the open road. The automobile offered something previous generations rarely experienced: spontaneous freedom. No schedules, no train tickets, no fixed routes. For the first time, millions could simply choose a direction and go. The automobile became more than transportation. It became a symbol of independence, adventure, possibility. The road trip emerged as a uniquely American ritual. Families packed their belongings, children squeezed into back seats, maps unfolded across dashboards, and entire generations set out to discover their country. No road captured the imagination of America more than Route 66. Opened in 1926, it connected Chicago to Los Angeles. More than 2,000 miles of asphalt and opportunity, it became known as the Main Street of America. Migrants traveled it. Tourists celebrated it. Businesses depended on it. Songs immortalized it. Movies romanticized it. Route 66 became more than a highway. It became a symbol of movement itself, a symbol of America's belief that the future always lay somewhere beyond the horizon. The automobile was changing more than transportation. It was changing where Americans lived. Before widespread car ownership, most people lived close to workplaces. Cities were dense, crowded, and concentrated. The automobile altered that equation. Workers could now commute. Families could move farther away. Developers seized the opportunity. Entire suburban communities emerged, new homes, new schools, new shopping centers, all connected by roads. The driveway became a fixture of American life. The garage became essential, and suburbia exploded across the landscape. By the middle of the 20th century, millions of Americans were living in communities that could not have existed without the automobile. The transformation was astonishing. The automobile had changed where people lived, how they worked, where they shopped, how they vacationed, and even how they imagined freedom. The nation that emerged looked fundamentally different from the nation that had existed only a generation earlier. America had not simply adopted the automobile. America had rebuilt itself around it. The machine that transformed transportation was about to transform the economy. Entire fortunes would be built, cities would rise, industries would explode, and one city would become the beating heart of the automotive age: Detroit. By the 1920s, the automobile was no longer merely changing America. It was becoming America's most powerful economic engine, and at the center of that revolution stood one city: Detroit, a place that would become synonymous with industrial power, a city that transformed steel, rubber, oil, and human labor into one of the greatest manufacturing machines in history. For a time, Detroit was not simply a city. It was the workshop of the modern world. At the dawn of the 20th century, Detroit was a relatively modest Midwestern city. Then the automobile arrived. Factories multiplied. Investors poured in. Workers arrived from every corner of America and from around the world. Population growth became explosive. Entire neighborhoods appeared almost overnight. Skyscrapers rose. Streetcar lines expanded. Businesses flourished. Detroit became a magnet for ambition. If you wanted opportunity, Detroit called your name. And millions answered. The automobile industry quickly became one of the most competitive arenas in American business. At first, Ford dominated. The model seemed unstoppable, but competitors were learning, and one company understood something. Henry Ford did not. People wanted choice. Enter General Motors. Under the leadership of visionary executives, General Motors transformed automobile marketing. Instead of offering one car for everyone, GM offered different cars for different aspirations. One could begin with an affordable vehicle, then move upward as income increased. Every promotion, every raise, every success could be celebrated with a new automobile. The strategy was brilliant, and devastatingly effective. For the first time, cars were not just transportation. They became expressions of identity. As competition intensified, automobile companies discovered a powerful truth. People did not buy cars only because they needed them. They bought them because they wanted them. Design became a weapon. Each year brought larger models, brighter colors, more chrome, more luxury, more horsepower. Automobiles became symbols of status, success, and personality. Manufacturers no longer sold transportation, they sold dreams. The American car became one of the most recognizable cultural symbols on Earth. The automobile industry did more than manufacture vehicles. It helped create modern middle-class America. Factory jobs provided wages that many workers had never imagined. Home ownership expanded. Consumer spending increased. Economic mobility accelerated. For millions of families, the path to prosperity began at an assembly line. One paycheck bought a car. The next helped buy a home. The automobile became both product and pathway, a machine that generated opportunity even as it consumed it. And nowhere was that more visible than Detroit. Then came a moment that changed everything. December 7, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor. America entered World War II, and suddenly, the nation's automobile factories faced a new mission. Stop building cars, start building victory. The transition was astonishing. Factories that had produced sedans and trucks now manufactured tanks, aircraft engines, military trucks, bombers, weapons. Millions of pieces of equipment flowed from assembly lines originally designed for automobiles. The same manufacturing techniques that had put America on wheels now helped put the Allies on the road to victory. President Franklin Roosevelt called America the arsenal of democracy. Detroit became its beating heart. The numbers remain difficult to comprehend. Thousands of tanks, hundreds of thousands of military vehicles, tens of thousands of aircraft. Industrial output reached levels the world had never witnessed. Nazi planners were stunned. Japanese strategists were overwhelmed. America's automotive infrastructure became one of the most decisive advantages of the war. The same machine that had transformed transportation now helped save democracy itself. When the war ended, America entered a period of extraordinary prosperity. Factories returned to automobile production. Demand exploded. Returning soldiers started families. Suburbs expanded. Highways multiplied. The automobile became the centerpiece of post-war life. This was the golden age of the American car. Huge sedans ruled the roads. Convertibles symbolized freedom. Drive-in restaurants flourished. Drive-in theaters appeared across the nation. Entire industries emerged to serve an increasingly mobile population. The automobile was no longer influencing American culture, it was defining it. For younger generations, cars became something more than machines. They became identity. Teenagers customized them. Musicians celebrated them. Movies glorified them. Entire subcultures formed around speed and style. The automobile became woven into music, film, advertising, and personal aspiration. Owning a car meant independence. Driving one meant possibility. And nowhere was that feeling stronger than on America's endless highways. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the automobile represented everything good about the future. But every revolution carries consequences, and the costs of the automobile age were beginning to emerge. Traffic, pollution, urban decline, oil dependency, and a growing realization that America's greatest machine came with a price. For decades, the automobile had represented progress, freedom, opportunity, prosperity. It connected families, created jobs, built suburbs, transformed industries, and helped shape the most powerful economy the world had ever seen. But every revolution creates consequences. And by the middle of the 20th century, the costs of the automobile age were becoming impossible to ignore. The very machine that had liberated Americans was beginning to reshape their lives in ways few had anticipated. The first signs appeared in America's cities. As automobile ownership exploded, urban planners faced a dilemma. Cities built for pedestrians and streetcars suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by traffic. Congestion grew worse every year. Intersections became bottlenecks. Downtown districts struggled to handle the flood of vehicles entering each day. The solution seemed obvious. Build more roads, build bigger roads, build highways. And so America embarked on another historic construction project, the Interstate Highway System. Stretching across mountains, deserts, forests, and cities, it would become one of the greatest engineering achievements in history. More than 40,000 miles of high-speed roadway. A network capable of connecting nearly every corner of the nation. It accelerated commerce, improved transportation, strengthened national defense, and changed the American landscape forever. But those highways came at a cost. Entire neighborhoods disappeared beneath concrete. Communities that had existed for generations were divided by massive roadways. Homes were demolished, businesses vanished, families were displaced. In many cities, highways cut directly through thriving neighborhoods. What was gained in mobility was often lost in community. The automobile had connected America, but in some places it had also fractured it. Then came another problem: traffic. More roads encouraged more driving. More driving created more congestion, and more congestion demanded even more roads. The cycle seemed endless. Rush hour became a daily ritual. Millions of Americans found themselves spending hours behind the wheel. The freedom promised by the automobile increasingly collided with the reality of gridlock. And then there was the air. By the 1960s and 1970s, smog hung over major cities. Visibility disappeared beneath thick layers of pollution. Children grew up under skies stained by exhaust. Scientists began connecting vehicle emissions to serious environmental and public health concerns. The automobile had transformed transportation, but it had also transformed the atmosphere. For the first time, Americans began asking difficult questions. Could unlimited growth continue forever? Could the benefits of the automobile be separated from its costs? And perhaps most importantly, what was fueling this entire system? The answer was oil. For generations, cheap gasoline had powered American mobility. Gas stations became as common as grocery stores. Road trips became a national pastime. Suburbs expanded endlessly outward. All of it depended upon a steady flow of petroleum. Then, in the 1970s, the illusion of unlimited fuel came crashing down. Oil crises sent shockwaves through the economy. Gasoline prices surged, long lines formed at filling stations. Drivers waited hours for fuel. For many Americans, it was the first realization that their way of life depended upon forces far beyond their control. The automobile had become more than a machine. It had become part of a global system, a system influenced by economics, politics, conflict, and uncertainty. The age of unquestioned automotive dominance was beginning to crack, and another challenge was already approaching from across the Pacific. For decades, American manufacturers had ruled the industry. Their factories produced millions of vehicles. Their brands were household names. Their influence seemed unstoppable, but foreign competitors saw opportunities where others saw limitations. Japanese automakers focused on efficiency, reliability, fuel economy, precision manufacturing. At first, many American executives dismissed them. That proved to be a costly mistake. Consumers embraced vehicles that were smaller, cheaper to operate, and remarkably dependable. Market share began shifting. Competition intensified. And for the first time in generations, Detroit faced a challenge unlike any it had encountered before. The city that had built modern automotive America entered a long and painful decline. Factories closed. Jobs disappeared. Neighborhoods struggled. Population fell. The transformation was heartbreaking. For much of the 20th century, Detroit symbolized industrial success. Now it became a symbol of industrial vulnerability. Yet, even as some chapters closed, another was beginning. A new generation of engineers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries believed the automobile's story was far from over. In fact, they believed its greatest transformation still lay ahead. More than a century earlier, electricity had nearly won the race to power the automobile. Then it lost. Gasoline dominated the 20th century. Electric vehicles became a historical footnote, or so it seemed. But history has a habit of revisiting old ideas. Advances in battery technology began changing what electric vehicles could achieve. Range increased. Performance improved. Costs gradually declined. What once seemed impractical suddenly appeared possible. The automobile industry found itself facing a question remarkably similar to the one asked more than 100 years earlier. What should power the future? The answer remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. Electric vehicles are no longer experiments. They are becoming a major force in transportation, and they represent one of the biggest shifts since the invention of the automobile itself. Yet electrification is only part of the story. Another revolution is unfolding simultaneously. Artificial intelligence, sensors, machine learning, autonomous systems. For generations, driving has required human attention, human judgment, human control. Now engineers are attempting something extraordinary, creating vehicles capable of navigating the world on their own. The implications are staggering: reduced accidents, improved accessibility, new transportation networks. Entire industries transformed. Just as the automobile once replaced the horse, autonomous technology may redefine what it means to travel. Whether that future arrives in 10 years or 50 remains unknown, but the direction of innovation is unmistakable. The automobile continues to evolve. and America continues to evolve alongside it. The story of the automobile is not really about engines, or factories, or roads. It is a story about transformation. Before the automobile, distance shaped destiny. People lived close to where they worked. Opportunities were limited by geography. Communities were constrained by mobility. The automobile changed all of that. It redefined movement, expanded horizons, and altered the physical structure of an entire nation. It built industries, created wealth, generated jobs, and helped produce one of the largest middle classes in human history. It reshaped cities, created suburbs, connected regions, and linked millions of lives together through an expanding network of roads. It carried families on vacations, workers to factories, soldiers to war, dreamers toward opportunity. Its influence reached far beyond transportation. It became part of culture, part of identity, part of the American imagination. The automobile reflected America's optimism, its ambition, its belief that the future was always somewhere just beyond the horizon. Yet its story is also one of complexity. The same machine that created prosperity contributed to pollution. The same roads that connected communities sometimes divided them. The same industry that built cities could also witness their decline. Like every transformative technology, the automobile reshaped the world in ways both inspiring and unexpected, and still its journey continues. Today, electric vehicles glide silently down roads once filled with roaring engines. Algorithms assist drivers. Computers manage performance. Autonomous systems promise possibilities that previous generations could scarcely imagine. The automobile is changing once again, just as it has changed countless times before. More than a century ago, a machine rolled onto America's roads and began rewriting the nation's future. It transformed landscapes, economies, communities, and lives. Few inventions have ever left a deeper mark on a country, because the automobile did not simply move America, it rebuilt it, and its story is far from over.